A pregnant woman walks toward the end of a marriage marked by abuse and humiliation, but when she arrives at the hearing, she's met with a cruel and unexpected emotional blow. The presence of a figure from her past changes everything in the blink of an eye, and the reunion that should have brought pain might just be the beginning of her redemption. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Now, on with the story. The morning hung heavy over New York City. The gray sky seemed to announce that this would be no ordinary day, that something beyond the usual was about to unfold in the air-conditioned rooms of the New York County Courthouse. Megan Carter woke up with the same feeling that had been her constant companion for months, a tightness in her chest that wasn't just anxiety, but the weight of carrying a new life inside her while facing the collapse of everything she had once called home. At 7 months pregnant, her body showed the transformation every expectant mother knows, but her eyes told a different story. They were tired eyes, marked by sleepless nights, unshed tears, and a loneliness that no round belly could fill. She dressed carefully that morning, choosing a navy blue dress that somewhat concealed the curve of her pregnancy, not out of shame, but in an unconscious attempt to shield herself from the stares she knew were coming. The rented apartment in Queens was small, but it was hers. After months of living under the controlling roof of Richard Taylor, her still husband, this modest space represented something much greater than 4 walls and some borrowed furniture. It represented freedom, even if it was tainted by financial insecurity and fear of the future. Megan glanced at her phone and saw a message from Mr. Michael Davis, her attorney. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and a calm demeanor she couldn't quite figure out. The message was short and to the point. "I'll be waiting for you at 9 at the courthouse entrance. Don't worry, we'll get through this together." She took a deep breath, placed a hand on her belly, and felt a gentle kick from the baby. It was as if the little being inside her knew she needed strength. Across the city in a penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side, Richard Taylor was finishing adjusting his Italian tie in the mirror. Everything about him exuded power: the tailored suit, the Swiss watch worth more than a sedan, the imported cologne that left a trail wherever he went. Richard was one of the most successful real estate developers in New York. He had built an empire by erecting luxury towers, buying up strategic properties, and, like many in his world, stepping on anyone necessary to get where he wanted. Beside him, fixing her platinum blonde hair, was Jessica Miller, 26 years old, a body sculpted, in expensive gyms, clothes that seemed to scream for attention rather than simply dress her. She was everything Megan wasn't: extravagant, confident to the point of arrogance, and fully aware of the power she held over Richard, or at least the power she thought she held. "Do you really think it's necessary for me to go with you?" Jessica asked, applying red gloss to her lips as she admired herself in the mirror. Richard smirked, the kind of smile he used when he wanted to assert control. "Of course it's necessary. I want her to see that I've moved on, that I don't need her anymore. The more insignificant she feels, the faster she'll sign these papers and get out of my life." "And the baby?" Jessica asked, adjusting the strap of the red dress she had deliberately chosen for the hearing. A dress more suited for a nightclub than a formal setting like a courthouse. "The baby changes nothing," Richard replied coldly. "The DNA tests will prove it's mine, and I'll do the bare minimum the law requires. Child support, visits every other weekend if I have time. Nothing more, she can figure out the rest." The courthouse was starting to fill up when Megan got out of the Uber that brought her there. Mr. Davis was already waiting at the entrance, with his time-worn leather briefcase and a reassuring smile. He was different from any lawyer she had ever imagined. He didn't use big words to impress, didn't promise impossible victories, but there was something about him that inspired trust. "Good morning, Megan. How are you feeling?" he asked, observing her with genuine concern. "Nervous," she admitted, her voice coming out weaker than she'd hoped. "I'm afraid of what he'll do in there. Richard is capable of anything, when he feels crossed." Mr. Davis placed a light hand on her shoulder, a fatherly and respectful gesture. "I know it's hard, but you need to trust the process. The truth always finds a way, even if it takes time. And today, you're not alone." They walked up the courthouse steps, through hallways that smelled of old paper and stale coffee. Megan felt the baby move again, as if it too were restless about what was to come. When they reached the hearing room, she saw that a few people were already waiting. The court clerk organizing papers, an elderly man with white hair sitting in the back, a young paralegal intern with a notepad. Then the door opened again, and Richard walked in. Not alone. Beside him, as if strutting down a runway, Jessica made sure to make her presence known. The red dress was eye-catching, her high heels echoed on the cold floor, and the smug smile she aimed at Megan was a silent but incredibly sharp weapon. Megan felt the world spin for a moment. Not because of Richard's presence, which she had expected, but because of the deliberate cruelty of bringing that woman into a room. That was supposed to be a space for legal resolution, not personal humiliation. Mr. Davis sensed the tension in his client's body and leaned in to whisper, "Breathe. He wants to unnerve you. Don't give him the satisfaction." Richard and his attorney, Mr. Henry Sampson, a man known for defending controversial cases and charging exorbitant fees, sat on the opposite side of the table. Jessica settled into the back row, but in a position where Megan could see her perfectly. It was intentional. Everything about it was calculated to hurt. "Good morning," Richard said, his voice dripping with false cordiality. "Megan, you look tired. Pregnancy must not be easy, I imagine." She didn't answer. Mr. Davis intervened before any words could escape her. "Let's stay focused on why we're here, Mr. Taylor." The judge had not yet arrived. The room was thick with a heavy silence, broken only by the rustling of papers and the faint clinking of Jessica's bracelets, as she seemed to enjoy the situation. Megan could feel her eyes on her, judging, belittling, reveling in a supposed victory that hadn't yet happened. That's when the door at the back of the room opened and the judge entered. Megan looked up reflexively, as did everyone else in the room, and then her heart stopped. It wasn't possible, it couldn't be. But it was. The man wearing the black robe, walking with an erect posture and a serious expression, was someone she hadn't seen in years. Someone she had tried to forget, to forgive, to hate, and to search for all at once. It was Arthur Evans, her father. His eyes met hers for a fraction of a second, and in that brief instant, Megan saw something she didn't expect. Recognition, surprise, and something that looked like guilt. Arthur quickly averted his gaze and walked to the bench, taking his position with the natural ease of someone who had been doing this for decades. "Good morning. I hereby begin the hearing for the contested divorce between Richard Taylor and Megan Carter. Will all parties present please identify themselves," he said, his voice firm and professional. Megan could barely process what was happening. Her father. Here. After so many years of absence, of silence, of unanswered questions. The man who had abandoned her when she was just a girl, who left without explanation, and who, according to her mother, never wanted anything to do with her again. And now fate, or some cruel cosmic irony, had placed him here, as the judge responsible for deciding her divorce. Mr. Davis noticed the change in Megan's face. He was observant enough to see that something beyond the natural tension of the moment was occurring. He leaned in and whispered, "Do you know the judge?" Megan couldn't answer. She just shook her head slightly, a gesture that was neither confirmation nor denial. It was pure confusion. The hearing began with standard procedures: identification of the parties, reading of the petitions, presentation of proposals for the division of assets. Richard was arrogant in his statements, interrupting his own lawyer to make it clear that he wouldn't give up anything he considered his, that the house where Megan used to live was his property, and that she should be content with minimal support. "I'd also like to state for the record," Richard said, addressing the judge with a falsely sympathetic smile, "that this pregnancy was her attempt to trap me. I didn't want kids right now, and she knew it. But, well, the child is on its way and I'll fulfill my legal obligations, nothing more." Megan felt tears welling up, but blinked hard to hold them back. She wouldn't cry here. Not in front of him. Not in front of that woman who was smiling in the back of the room as if she were watching a show. It was then that Arthur, still on the bench, looked directly at Richard and spoke, with a firmness that seemed to carry something more than just judicial authority. Mr. Taylor, in this courtroom, we will treat everyone with respect. Mrs. Carter is not a defendant, not an adversary. She is the mother of the child you are expecting and deserves full consideration. I ask you to watch your words." Richard seemed surprised by the reprimand, but nodded with an ironic smile. In the back, Jessica rolled her eyes. The hearing continued, but the tension in the room seemed to escalate with each passing minute. Megan tried to focus on her lawyer's questions, on the proposals Mr. Davis was making, but her eyes kept drifting back to the man on the bench. Her father. The man she had imagined reuniting with so many times. And now he was here, so close and yet so far, separated by decades of silence and a robe that prevented him from being just a father. That's when Jessica, tired of merely observing, decided to interfere. She stood up from her chair, fixed her hair, and walked to the front, as if she had every right to be there. "Excuse me," she said, her voice loud and provocative. "I just wanted to make one thing clear. This woman here is no victim. She knew exactly what she was getting into when she married Richard. And now she's putting on this whole act, this poor little me face, just because she couldn't hold on to him. I could." The silence that followed was deafening. Mr. Davis stood up immediately. "Your Honor, this person has no standing to speak in this hearing. I request that she be removed from the room." Arthur looked at Jessica with an expression that was hard to read. "Ma'am, you are not a party to this proceeding. Please sit down and remain silent, or I will have to ask you to leave." But Jessica wasn't the type to take orders easily. She took a step toward the table where Megan was sitting, and with a venomous smile said, "You think you're going to get anything with that little belly of yours? You think you'll win his pity? Richard is mine now, and you're the past." Megan felt something inside her snap. It wasn't fear anymore. It was anger. An anger that came from months of swallowing humiliation, of nights crying alone, of hearing harsh words and feeling invisible. She stood up slowly, leaning her hands on the table. "You don't know anything about me. Nothing about what I've been through. And I'm not here fighting over any man with you. I'm here fighting for my child, for my dignity, and for my future. If you want to be with him, fine. But don't you dare come in here and try to diminish me." The room was in suspense. Even Richard seemed surprised by Megan's reaction. Jessica, however, did not like being confronted. She took another step forward, her face red with rage. "You phony, you're nothing but a gold digger who—" And then it happened. In a swift, thoughtless motion, Jessica lifted her leg and gave Megan a hard shove. The impact was right on her belly. Megan stumbled backward, her hands instinctively protecting her womb, and fell into the chair. Behind her, her face contorted in pain. Chaos erupted in the room. Mr. Davis rushed to help Megan. The intern, Rachel, who was in the corner, raised her phone and recorded everything. The elderly man, Gilbert, stood up indignantly, shouting that this was an outrage. And Arthur, the judge, descended from the bench in a move that stunned everyone. He was no longer the impartial magistrate. He was a father seeing his daughter in danger. He went straight to Megan, kneeling beside her, his voice trembling. "Are you okay? Is the baby okay?" Megan looked at him, her eyes full. 12 tears, and in that moment all the grudges, all the years of absence, all the unanswered questions seemed small compared to the pain she felt. "Dad," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Richard turned pale. Jessica froze. The entire room seemed to stop in time. And then Megan felt something warm run down her legs. She looked down and saw it. Blood. Not a lot, but enough for terror to seize her heart. "My baby," she murmured, the tears finally falling uncontrollably. "My baby." Arthur, still kneeling beside her, looked at the court clerk. "Call an ambulance. Now." Then he turned his eyes back to Megan, and for the first time in years he wasn't the judge. He was the father she had lost. "It's going to be okay. I promise. I won't let anything happen to you or my grandchild." The room remained in shock. Richard tried to say something, but Mr. Davis stopped him. "Don't even think about opening your mouth right now. You and this woman have just committed a very serious act in front of all these witnesses." Jessica, realizing the gravity of the situation, tried to justify herself. "I didn't do anything. She provoked me. But no one was listening. Rachel, the intern, was already sending the video to her supervisor. Gilbert, the retired man, was already asking to give a statement. And Arthur, holding Megan's hand, felt the weight of all the years he had spent away from her come crashing down on his shoulders. The ambulance arrived in minutes. Megan was placed on a stretcher, still conscious, still terrified. Arthur held her hand until the last moment before she was taken away. "I'll be there," he said, his voice firm. "You can count on me." When the courthouse doors closed, behind the ambulance, Arthur returned to the hearing room. But now he was no longer the judge who had started the session. He was a man transformed by the revelation and the urgency to protect the one he had failed to protect years ago. He looked at Richard and Jessica, who were still standing there as if they couldn't believe what they had done. "This hearing is suspended. And you two," he pointed firmly, "will answer for everything that happened here today." Richard tried to protest, but Arthur raised his hand. "Don't say another word. Every word that comes out of your mouth now can and will be used against you. Now get out of my sight before I forget about the robe I'm wearing." And as they left, Arthur sat on the empty bench, putting his hands to his face. So many years running from the past. So many years trying to convince himself he had made the right choice by staying away. And now, on a Tuesday morning, in a New York City courtroom, everything he had tried to forget had returned with the force of a hurricane. Megan was in the hospital, alone and scared, carrying not just a baby, but also the weight of a lifetime of abandonment. And he, Arthur, finally had the chance to do what he should have done a long time ago. Be a father, be present, protect. And it didn't matter what the law said. It didn't matter what the judicial code of ethics required. He was not going to leave his daughter alone again. Tell me what you think of this story, and how you think it will end. Lenox Hill Hospital, one of the best-equipped facilities on the Upper East Side, received Megan amidst a whirlwind of activity. Doctors, nurses, gurneys being pushed through the bright white hallways. She was taken directly to the obstetrics wing, where the on-call team had already been briefed on the situation. Dr. Henry Morris, the OB on duty that morning, got straight to the point. "Mrs. Carter, I need you to stay calm. We're going to run all the necessary tests to make sure you and the baby are okay," he said, with a voice that tried to convey tranquility, but which Megan knew hid concern. She lay on the gurney, still wearing the same navy blue dress she had chosen so carefully that morning. Now the fabric felt like a painful reminder of how the day had begun with hope and ended in a nightmare. Her hands trembled as she caressed her belly, trying to feel any movement from the baby. "Is he okay? Please tell me he's okay," she pleaded, her voice breaking. A nurse placed the fetal monitor on her belly, and within seconds the sound of the baby's heartbeat filled the room. It was fast, but it was there, strong, alive. Megan closed her eyes and let the tears flow freely. "Thank God," she whispered. Dr. Morris examined the monitor carefully. "The heartbeat is strong, but we're going to do a full ultrasound and check for any placental abruption or other complications. The bleeding you had might just be a scare, but we need to be certain." As the medical team worked, Megan felt strangely alone, even surrounded by so many people. Where was Mr. Davis and her father? Did he really say he would come? Or was that just a momentary reaction driven by the dramatic scene in the courtroom? She no longer knew what to believe. Across the city, Arthur Evans was still at the courthouse, but no longer on the bench. He had retreated to his private chambers, where he usually prepared for hearings and reviewed cases. But at that moment, he couldn't think of anything but Megan's frightened face, the blood on her clothes, the way she had whispered "Dad," with a mix of pain and supplication that had pierced through decades of emotional armor. He took off his robe and hung it on a hook, looking at it as if it were a piece of clothing that had suddenly become too heavy to bear. His phone rang. It was Robert, his chief clerk. "Judge, what happened in there was recorded. It's already in the hands of the DA's office, and there's more. The press is starting to pick up on it. Someone leaked that there was an assault in the courtroom." Arthur sighed deeply. He knew this wouldn't be contained. In an era where everyone has a camera in their pocket, nothing stays secret for long. "Prepare the case file. I'm going to recuse myself from this case. It's clear I have a personal connection to one of the parties." "But, sir," You didn't know that before taking the case, Robert argued. It doesn't matter. I know now. And the right thing to do is to step away. He paused. And Robert, I need you to find out which hospital they took Megan to. I need to go there. There was silence on the other end of the line. Robert had known the judge for years and had never seen him act so personally in relation to a case. Understood, sir. I'll find that information. Meanwhile, in the luxurious Upper East Side apartment, Richard Taylor paced back and forth, his phone glued to his ear. He was talking to Mr. Henry Sampson, his attorney, who was trying to calm him down with legal explanations of how they could spin the situation. Richard, listen. It was an impulsive act by your partner, not you. You can't be held directly responsible, Mr. Sampson said, though his voice held less conviction than his words. Don't be naive, Henry, Richard yelled. I took her there. I was standing right next to her. And to make matters worse, that judge turned out to be Megan's father. Do you understand what that means? He's going to use all his influence to destroy me. Jessica was sitting on the white leather sofa, her perfectly manicured nails tapping on the armrest. Unlike Richard, she didn't seem remorseful. If there was anything on her face, it was irritation at being interrupted, at being reprimanded. She deserved it, Jessica muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. Playing the victim, putting on that whole show. Richard hung up the phone and looked at her with an expression that mixed anger and disbelief. You really don't get the gravity of what you did, do you? You assaulted a pregnant woman in a courthouse in front of witnesses, with everything being filmed. This isn't just going to... Go away. Jessica stood up, adjusting the red dress that now seemed like a brand of something terribly wrong. I did what you didn't have the guts to do. I put her in her place. If you had been firmer from the beginning, she wouldn't be making such a scene. Richard shook his head, realizing for the first time that the woman beside him wasn't the ally he had imagined. She was a ticking time bomb, and she had just exploded in his face. Back at the hospital, Megan had been moved to a private room. The ultrasound showed that, despite the scare, the baby was fine. There was no placental abruption, and the heartbeat remained strong. The bleeding had been caused by minor trauma, but nothing that compromised the pregnancy. Dr. Morris recommended complete bed rest for at least a week and daily monitoring. You were lucky, Megan, very lucky, he said, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. But you need to rest. Stress and sudden movements can be dangerous at this stage of pregnancy. Megan thanked him, but her mind was elsewhere. She looked at the door to her room, waiting. She didn't know exactly for whom or why, but there was a silent expectation in her chest. And then the door opened. It was Arthur. He entered with hesitant steps, as if unsure if he would be welcome. He was in civilian clothes now, a light-colored dress shirt and dark slacks. Without the robe, he seemed smaller, more human, more vulnerable. Megan watched him in silence, not knowing what to say. He stopped at the foot of the bed, his hands in his pockets, his eyes fixed on her. May I come in? He asked, his voice low. Megan nodded slightly. She didn't trust her own voice at that moment. Arthur pulled up a chair and sat beside the bed, maintaining a respectful but present distance. How are you? And the baby? We're okay, Megan answered, her voice still weak. It was a big scare, but we're okay. Silence. A heavy silence filled with years not lived together, missed birthdays, unattended graduations, unwiped tears. Arthur looked at his own hands, as if searching for the right words somewhere other than that hospital room. Megan, he began, but stopped. How could he explain a lifetime of absence in a few words? How could he ask for forgiveness for something that couldn't be undone? Megan interrupted him, her voice gaining a surprising firmness. Why did you leave? The question was simple, but it carried the weight of decades. Arthur took a deep breath, knowing he couldn't run from it. Not anymore. I was a coward, he admitted, and there was a raw honesty in those words. When your mother and I separated, I was at the beginning of my career. I worked day and night, studied for exams, traveled for courses, and I convinced myself that you'd be better off without me, without an absent father, who only showed up on weekends. Your mother had a family, she had stability, and all I had was ambition and a fear of failure. Megan felt the tears return, but this time she didn't hold them back. You think I was better off without you? Do you know how many times I waited by the window thinking you were coming to get me? How many nights I cried asking my mum why you didn't love me? The words were like knives to Arthur. He lowered his head, unable to meet his daughter's gaze. I always loved you, Megan. Always. But I was young, selfish, and stupid. I thought money would make up for my absence. I sent child support, gifts on special occasions, but I never gave you what you really needed, my presence. And by the time I realized the mistake I had made, it was too late. You had already grown up, you had your own life, and I didn't know how to come back. Megan wiped her tears with the back of her hand. A part of her wanted to scream, to throw this man out of her room, to punish him for all the pain she had carried. But another part, a part she didn't even know still existed, just wanted a father. She wanted someone to protect her, to be by her side when everything fell apart. Like now. I needed you, she said, her voice choked. And you weren't there. When I married Richard, when everything started to go wrong, when he started treating me like I was nothing, I needed a father. And you weren't there. Arthur looked up, and Megan saw that he was crying too. Quietly, but he was crying. I know, and I can't change the past. I can't undo the mistakes I made, but I can be here now, if you'll let me, if you'll give me a chance to be the father I should have been a long time ago. Megan looked at him, really looked. She saw the wrinkles around his eyes, the greying hair, the hands that trembled slightly. He was just a man, flawed, imperfect, full of regrets, just as she was just a woman trying to survive a broken marriage and protect the life she carried inside her. I don't know if I can forgive you, she said with painful honesty. Not, now maybe never completely, but I need help. I need someone. And if you're really willing to be here, then I accept. Arthur nodded, discreetly wiping his eyes. I will be, I promise. And I'll do everything in my power to protect you and my grandchild. In that moment, something shifted. It wasn't complete forgiveness, not total reconciliation, but it was a start, a small step on a very long staircase they would have to climb together. The door to the room opened again, and Mr. Davis entered, holding his briefcase and wearing a serious expression. Megan, I came as soon as I could. How are you? He asked, and then he noticed Arthur. Judge Evans. Arthur stood up. Mr. Davis, I was just speaking with my daughter. He emphasized the word daughter with a firmness that made his position clear. And I want to make something very clear to you as her attorney. I have recused myself from the case, but I will do everything in my power, within the law, to ensure she is protected, and that those responsible for what happened today are punished. Mr. Davis nodded. I appreciate that, Judge, and I can assure you we will do our part as well. The assault was filmed by at least 3 witnesses. The DA's office is already aware, and Mr. Richard Taylor and his partner will have to answer criminally for what they did. Megan heard this with a mix of relief and apprehension. She wanted justice, but she also knew Richard wouldn't accept being confronted. He had money, connections, influence. He would do everything to turn the situation around. He's going to try to destroy me, she murmured. You don't know Richard like I do. He's capable of anything when he feels threatened. And that's why you won't face this alone, Arthur said, sitting back down. From now on, any move he makes, any attempt at intimidation, will have to go through me, and I'm no longer the man who runs from a fight. Mr. Davis smiled slightly. It seems Megan has gained a powerful ally. Megan looked at her father, and for the first time in decades she felt something akin to safety. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't ideal, but it was something. It was more than she had yesterday. That night, as Megan rested in the hospital under medical observation, news of the incident at the courthouse began to spread. Local news sites published vague articles about a disturbance in a divorce hearing. Social media groups buzzed about an assault on a pregnant woman in court. The videos recorded by Rachel, the intern, and other witnesses started to circulate, though they hadn't yet gone viral. Richard, in his apartment, watched the news with growing desperation. His PR team had already called 3 times trying to contain the crisis. Investors were starting to ask questions. Business partners were demanding explanations, and Jessica, the cause of it all, continued to act as if she were the victim. "I need to give an interview," Jessica said, breaking the tense silence in the apartment. "I need to tell my side of the story, that she provoked me, that I was just defending myself." Richard looked at her as if he were seeing a stranger. "You're not giving any interviews. You've done enough damage. Anything you say now will only make things worse." "So what do you want me to do? Stay quiet while they destroy me?" she retorted, her voice rising. "That's exactly what you should have done from the beginning," Richard shot back, his anger finally surfacing. "Stayed quiet. But no, you had to go there and prove you were stronger than her, better than her, and now look where it's gotten us." The argument between them continued, but by then the damage was done. And across the city, in the quiet room of a hospital, Megan finally slept, her hand resting on her belly, feeling the gentle movements of her baby, and with the certainty that for the first time in a long time, she was not completely alone. The following days brought changes Megan could never have imagined. She was discharged from the hospital with strict orders to rest, but her life was far from peaceful. The video of the assault in the courthouse finally went viral, shared thousands of times in a matter of hours. Richard Taylor's name, once associated with luxury and success, was now linked to words like abuser, coward, and aggressor. Megan was in her rented apartment trying to process everything that was happening. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from journalists, old acquaintances, even people she didn't know. Mr. Davis had advised her not to give any interviews or make public statements, to let the facts speak for themselves. But silence was difficult when the whole world seemed to have an opinion about her life. The doorbell rang. Megan looked through the peephole and saw a woman she hadn't seen in years, Mariah, her older sister. They had grown distant after their mother's death, disagreements over the inheritance and family decisions, creating a chasm that had seemed insurmountable. But there she was, standing at the door with a suitcase in her hand and red-rimmed eyes. Megan opened the door slowly. "Mariah." "I saw the news," Mariah said, her voice choked with emotion. "I saw what that monster did to you. And I couldn't stay away, not this time." She stepped forward and hugged Megan tightly, careful not to squeeze her belly. "I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry I was too proud to be by your side when you needed me." Megan felt tears stream down her face. She hadn't known how much she needed that hug until it happened. "You're here now. That's what matters." The two entered the apartment. Mariah left her suitcase in the corner of the living room and looked around. The place was simple, without the luxuries Megan had when she lived with Richard, but there was something welcoming about it, something real. "Are you alone?" Mariah asked. "Dad showed up," Megan said, seeing the surprise on her sister's face. "He was the judge on the case. I didn't know. It was a coincidence. But after everything happened, he's been coming over, bringing food, asking how I am, offering help." Mariah sat on the sofa, processing the information. She had her own grievances with Arthur, her own unresolved issues. "And you trust him?" Megan sighed. "I don't know. I mean, he did things that are inexcusable, but at the same time, he's here, he's trying, and I can't deny that it makes a difference." "Just be careful," Mariah warned, with the wisdom of someone who had been disappointed many times. "Sometimes people show up when it's convenient and disappear when things get tough." "I know," Megan agreed, "but now I have you too, and that already changes everything." While the sisters talked on the other side of the city, Richard was facing a very different reality. His company, Taylor Properties, was in crisis. 3 major investors had pulled their contracts. The bank had backed out of a crucial loan for a new project. And worst of, all the board of directors was pressuring him to step down temporarily until the situation cooled off. In the office conference room, Richard faced 5 men in suits who looked at him with a mixture of concern and disapproval. Among them was Anthony Silver, the oldest partner, a 70-year-old man who had been Richard's mentor in his early career. "Richard, do you understand the gravity of the situation?" Anthony said, his voice weary. Our image is tarnished. Clients are reconsidering contracts. The board is getting pressure from all sides. You need to step down. Step down, Richard repeated, incredulous. I built this company. I'm not stepping down because some ex-wife decided to cause drama. Drama? Another board member interjected, clearly irritated. Richard, there's a video of you watching your partner assault a pregnant woman. That's not drama, it's a crime, and it's destroying everything we've built. Richard clenched his fists. I didn't do anything. It was her, Jessica. I didn't touch Megan. But you were there, Anthony said firmly. You brought that woman to a courthouse, to a divorce hearing. You created the environment for it to happen. And now, whether you like it or not, you're part of the story. And the story is destroying us. After a long argument, Richard was forced to accept a temporary 3-month leave of absence. He left the corporate building feeling betrayed, humiliated, and furious. And the first person he blamed, of course, was Megan. It was all her fault. For going to court, for making a scene, for having a judge for a father who was now using his influence against him. In his mind, he was the victim, and victims need revenge. Jessica, for her part, was facing her own consequences. She had been formally charged with assault on a pregnant woman, a felony with serious aggravating factors. Her expensive lawyer, whom Richard was paying for, was trying to build a defense based on emotional provocation, claiming Megan had insulted Jessica first. But the witnesses and the videos told a different story. Worse still, Jessica's family, who had once bragged about her relationship with a wealthy developer, was now pressuring her to distance herself from Richard. You're being used, Jessica, her mother had said on the phone. He's using you as a shield, and when he doesn't need you anymore, he'll throw you away. But Jessica wouldn't listen. She clung to Richard as if he were her only salvation, not realizing he was drowning too. In court, a new judge had taken over Megan and Richard's divorce case. Judge Beatrice Campos, a magistrate known for her strictness and impartiality. She reviewed all the files, heard witness accounts, and made swift, decisive rulings. An emergency order of protection was granted to Megan. Richard was prohibited from coming within 200 yards of her. Temporary child support was set at a high amount, based on the developer's proven income, and a criminal case was opened not only against Jessica, but also against Richard, for complicity by omission. When Mr. Davis brought the news to Megan, she didn't know how to feel. Part of her was relieved, protected by the law, but another part knew this would only make Richard more dangerous, more desperate. He's not going to accept this, Megan said, sitting on her apartment sofa with Mariah by her side. You don't understand. Richard is driven by control, and now he's lost everything. Control over me, over his company, over his image. He's going to want to get it back somehow. That's what restraining orders are for, Mr. Davis explained, though his expression showed he was also concerned. Any attempt at improper contact, any threat, and he'll be arrested. But Megan knew Richard better than any lawyer. She knew he was smart enough not to make obvious moves. He would work in the shadows, manipulate situations, use third parties. That's how he operated in business, and that's how he would operate against her. And she was right. 3 days later, Megan received a strange call. It was from a woman who identified herself as a social worker, claiming there had been an anonymous complaint about Megan's living conditions and questioning her ability to care for a newborn. Megan was shocked. A complaint? What complaint? Who made it? The woman was evasive but scheduled a home visit. When Mr. Davis found out, he immediately suspected Richard. He's trying to build a case to sue for custody of the baby when it's born, the attorney explained. It's a dirty tactic, but common in messy divorces. Megan felt the world spin. He can't do that. He can't take my son from me. And he won't, Arthur said, entering the apartment at that moment. He had developed a habit of visiting Megan daily, always bringing something. Food, books, sometimes just his presence. We'll make sure everything is perfect for this visit, and we'll show that any complaint against you is baseless. Mariah looked at Arthur with an unreadable expression. It was the first time she had seen him since he had returned to Megan's life. So you're the father who finally decided to show up, she said, not trying to hide the sarcasm in her voice. Arthur held her gaze. I'm the father who's trying to fix his mistakes. And I know it won't be easy to earn your respect, Mariah, but I'm here for Megan, for my grandson, and I'm not giving up." There was a tense moment, but Mariah eventually looked away. She wasn't ready to forgive, but she wasn't going to stop Megan from getting the support she needed. The social worker's visit took place the following week. The woman inspected every corner of the apartment, asked questions about Megan's income, her postpartum plans, her support network. Megan answered everything calmly, showing that she had Mariah living with her, that she had regular medical checkups, and that the apartment, though simple, was clean and safe. In the end, the social worker made her notes and left without much explanation. But Mr. Davis, who had been present for the entire visit, seemed confident. "She didn't find anything wrong. The report will be favorable to you." But Megan couldn't relax. She felt like she was in a war where she didn't know all the enemy's weapons, and Richard had always had more resources, more connections, more power. That's when Arthur made a proposal. "Megan, I have a house. It's big. It has security. It's in a safe neighborhood. You and Mariah could move in there, at least until the baby is born and things calm down." Megan looked at him, surprised. "Move into your house? Live with you?" "I know it's not ideal," Arthur admitted. "I know there's still a lot between us that needs to be resolved, but right now it's not about me or you. It's about this baby, and the more protected you are, the better." Mariah crossed her arms, clearly suspicious. "And what do you get out of this? To clear your conscience? To pretend you're a doting father after decades?" "I get the chance to protect my daughter," Arthur replied without hesitation. "And if that also gives me a chance to prove that I've changed, that I've learned, then yes, maybe it's also about clearing my conscience. But mostly it's about doing what's right, and what's right is making sure Megan is safe." Megan looked at Mariah, then at Arthur, and then at her own belly. The baby kicked at that moment as if giving his opinion. She took a deep breath and made a decision that would have been unthinkable months ago. "Okay, we'll accept. But on one condition. If at any point I feel like this isn't working, that you're trying to control my life or make me feel indebted, I'm leaving. And you won't try to stop me." Arthur nodded. "You have my word." And so, amidst the chaos, Megan took another step toward a life she was still figuring out. She moved into the house of the father who had been absent for most of her life, alongside the sister she had fought with, fleeing from a man who had sworn to love her but now hunted her, and carrying within her a life that represented both hope and fear in equal measure. Richard, when he learned of the move through his informants, felt his rage grow even stronger. Megan was fortifying herself, making allies, building barriers, and he, who had always been in control, watched his empire crumble stone by stone. He looked at Jessica, who was asleep on the sofa after another one of their arguments, and realized she wasn't the solution. She never was. She was just another mistake in a long list of bad choices he had made. But Richard Taylor was not a man who accepted defeat. And if he couldn't have Megan back, if he couldn't have the control he always had, then he would at least make sure she understood that crossing him came with a price he was more than willing to make her pay. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of preparations and tension. Megan was now living in Arthur's house, a spacious residence in a quiet New York neighborhood. The place had gardens, security, and a peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. Mariah had taken on the role of primary caregiver, ensuring her sister rested, ate well, and didn't stress more than necessary. Arthur, for his part, tried to balance his professional responsibilities with his new family reality. He would arrive from the courthouse in the late afternoon and invariably ask, "How was your day? Did the baby move much? Do you need anything?" They were simple gestures, but they meant the world to a woman who had spent months feeling invisible. The relationship between father and daughter wasn't perfect. There were moments of uncomfortable silence, painful memories that surfaced without warning, resentments that wouldn't disappear overnight. But there were also moments of connection, when Arthur placed his hand on Megan's belly and felt his grandson kick, when he told stories of his own childhood, when he simply sat beside her to watch a movie without saying a word. Jessica's criminal trial was scheduled. The DA's office had gathered compelling evidence, videos from 3 different angles clearly showing the assault, testimonies from witnesses who were present in the courtroom, and Megan's medical report confirming the trauma. Jessica tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor, DA Helen Mason, was unyielding. Violence against a pregnant woman is a serious crime and must be made an example of. There will be no deal, she stated publicly. Richard, though not being criminally tried in that first instance, faced a lawsuit for omission and complicity. But what was truly destroying him wasn't the prospect of a legal conviction. It was the social condemnation. His name had become synonymous with abuse. Major contracts were cancelled. Longtime friends distanced themselves. And his company, once a symbol of success, was now on the brink of bankruptcy. One morning, Richard woke up and looked around his empty apartment. Jessica had left 3 days earlier, taking her things and leaving only a short note. "You never really loved me. I was just a way to hurt her, but in the end you're the one who got hurt." He crumpled the paper and threw it in the trash. But the words echoed in his mind because deep down he knew they were true. Mr. Davis had secured a significant victory in the divorce proceedings. Judge Beatrice Campos ordered an equitable division of assets, ensuring Megan received half of everything acquired during the marriage, including shares in several properties. Richard tried to contest it, claiming he had invested heavily before the marriage, but the records proved otherwise. He was losing not only his wife but also half of his net worth. The due date was approaching. Megan entered her 38th week of pregnancy, and her obstetrician, Dr. Henry Morris, advised her to be alert for any signs of labor. The baby's nursery had been set up in Arthur's house with new furniture he had insisted on buying himself. There was a light wood crib, a dresser full of clothes Mariah had bought, and a soft lamp that filled the room with a warm yellow glow. "What are you going to name him?" Mariah asked one afternoon as she folded tiny baby clothes. Megan smiled, caressing her belly. "Gabriel. I've always loved that name. It means messenger, a bearer of good news. I think after everything I've been through, he really is good news. Gabriel Carter." Mariah tested the name in the air. "I like it, and he's going to be loved, Megan. So loved." "I know," Megan replied, and there was a certainty in her voice that hadn't existed months ago. "He's going to grow up knowing he's loved, that he's wanted, that he matters. Everything I wished someone had told me when I was a kid." Arthur, who had just arrived and overheard the end of the conversation, felt a pang in his chest. Every word from Megan was a reminder of his failures, but also a chance to do things differently with his grandson. He entered the room and said, "Gabriel will grow up knowing he has a grandfather who would give his life for him, and that even though he came into his mother's life late, he'll be present for every moment of his." Megan looked at her father and for the first time smiled with genuine gratitude. It wasn't complete forgiveness, but it was acceptance. It was peace. Labor began on a rainy November morning. Megan woke up with regular contractions and woke Mariah, who in turn woke Arthur. Within minutes, they were on their way to Lenox Hill Hospital, the same one where Megan had been treated after the assault. This time, however, the reason was much happier. Dr. Henry Morris was on call and greeted Megan with a smile. "It's time, Megan. Are you ready?" "I am," she replied, and this time there was no fear in her voice. There was determination. The delivery was quick and without complications. Gabriel was born at 6 in the morning, weighing 7 pounds and 8 ounces, with a strong cry that filled the room with life. When they placed the baby in Megan's arms, she felt a wave of love so intense it almost hurt. He was her son, hers, and no one, absolutely no one, would ever take him from her. Arthur and Mariah were allowed into the room shortly after. The grandfather approached with cautious steps, his eyes misty. "May I?" he asked, holding out his hands. Megan nodded, and Arthur held Gabriel for the first time. The baby was so small, so fragile, so perfect. "Hi, Gabriel. I'm your grandpa, and I promise you, my grandson, that I will be present. I'll be at every birthday, every school play, every time you need me. I promise I won't make the same mistakes with you that I made with your mother." Megan saw a tear roll down her father's face, and in that moment she felt something break inside her. It wasn't anger. It was compassion. It was the understanding that everyone is human, everyone makes mistakes, and everyone deserves a second chance when they genuinely try to change. "He'll be lucky to have you," Megan said, her voice soft. Jessica's trial took place 2 weeks after Gabriel's birth. Megan did not attend, but Mr. Davis represented her and submitted her testimony in writing. The verdict was guilty. Jessica was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison for assault, with the aggravating factor of it being against a pregnant woman. She was also ordered to pay significant punitive damages to Megan. Richard, though not criminally convicted in that trial, faced the consequences of his actions in other ways. His company declared bankruptcy months later. He lost most of his properties to pay off debts and legal settlements, and most importantly, he lost any shred of respect he still had in the business world. One afternoon, Megan was in the garden of Arthur's house, holding Gabriel in her arms when her phone rang. It was an unknown number. She hesitated but answered. "Hello?" "Megan, it's me. Richard." The silence that followed was heavy. Megan hadn't spoken to him since that day in court. "What do you want?" I wanted to ask to see Gabriel," Richard said, and there was something different in his voice. It wasn't arrogance. It was defeat. "I know I don't deserve it. I know I ruined everything. But he's my son too." Megan looked at the baby in her arms, so innocent, so oblivious to all the pain surrounding his existence. "Richard, you had the chance to be a father. You had the chance to be present, to support me, to build a family, but you chose pride, control, and revenge. Gabriel doesn't deserve to grow up around someone who only knows how to destroy. Please, Megan, I've changed. I've lost everything. The company, the money, my friends. You've already won. You don't have to take my son from me, too." "I didn't win, Richard. I survived. And Gabriel isn't a prize to be fought over. He's a life, and that life is going to be surrounded by love, respect, and dignity. Things you never gave me." She took a deep breath. "When he's older, if he wants to know you, I won't stop him. But until then, you'll have to prove you've truly changed. Not with words, but with actions. Stay away from us until you're actually worthy of being near him." Richard was silent on the other end of the line. And then, for the first time in a long time, he said something sincere. "I'm sorry, Megan, for everything." "Me too," she replied. And she hung up. Arthur, who had overheard the conversation from the porch, came over. "You did the right thing." "I know," Megan said, stroking Gabriel's face. "But one day he's going to ask me about his father, and I'll have to find a way to explain all of this without planting hatred in his heart." "You'll find the right words when the time comes," Arthur assured her, "because you're an incredible mother, and he's a lucky boy to have you." Megan smiled. Yes, Gabriel was lucky. He had a mother who fought for him before he was even born. He had an aunt who dropped her life to be there. And he had a grandfather who, despite arriving late, was doing everything he could to make up for lost time. The months passed. Gabriel grew strong and healthy. Megan went back to work, this time at a law firm where Mr. Davis had gotten her a position as a paralegal. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, it was hers, and it paid the bills. She bought a small apartment for herself and Gabriel, not because she didn't like living with Arthur, but because she needed to prove to herself that she could stand on her own 2 feet. Arthur understood and supported her, though he made it clear that the doors to his house would always be open. Rachel, the intern who had recorded the video of the assault, became friends with Megan. She visited occasionally and loved playing with Gabriel. Gilbert, the retired man who had testified in court, also kept in touch, always sending messages asking about the baby. Megan's life wasn't perfect. There were bills to pay, sleepless nights because of Gabriel, moments of loneliness and longing for a love that never really existed. But there was also laughter, tight hugs from her son, breakfasts with Mariah, dinners at Arthur's house where he told funny stories from the courthouse. One day, while rocking Gabriel to sleep, Megan looked out the window and saw the New York City skyline lit up at night. It was the same city where she had felt so small, so invisible, so broken. But now she was different. She was stronger, wiser, more whole. She didn't need a man to validate her. She didn't need wealth to feel valuable. She didn't need external approval to know her own worth. She was Megan Carter, Gabriel's mother, Arthur's daughter, Mariah's sister. And that was enough. Richard, wherever he was living with the consequences of his choices. Jessica was serving her sentence with all the time in the world to reflect on her actions. And Megan? Megan was finally free. Free to live, to love, to be. She kissed Gabriel's forehead as he slept peacefully in her arms. "You're going to grow up knowing you are loved," she whispered. "You're going to grow up knowing you can be anything you want, that you deserve respect, that your voice matters. Because I'm going to make sure of it, if it's the last thing I do." And as the moon shone over New York City, a city of millions of stories, Megan's story found not an ending, but a new beginning. A beginning built on rubble, but a true beginning. And sometimes that's all we need. A chance to start over. A chance to be who we really are. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Megan, Gabriel, and Arthur has touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of resilience, courage, and new beginnings, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what stood out to you the most. Was it Megan's strength, Arthur's repentance, the justice that was served? Every day we bring you intense stories like this one, revealing the deepest side of the human soul, and showing that even in the most difficult situations, there is always hope for a fresh start. Each story is a window into understanding the complexity of human relationships, the strength that lies within each of us, and our capacity to reinvent ourselves. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode, with another narrative that will stir your emotions and make you reflect on life. Until then, may Megan's story inspire you to never give up on yourself,